Anytime, Jared.
At least
That
from
was
you.
because of
Me today in chambers is Council Vice President Kritzer, and online we have Council Members Forsyth, Stewart, Fields, and Khan, and Mr. Carson will be joining us a little bit later after he's done experiencing some unfortunate car trouble today. We have 2 items on our agenda, and just a point of personal privilege. Happy Father's Day to those folks who celebrated over the weekend. I should say belated Father's Day, and also just an acknowledgement of Pride Month. This is our first meeting for Public Safety and Human Services this month in June, so happy Pride. We have 2 items on our agenda today. The first item is the award of bid to Apex Mechanical LLC of Battleground, Washington for electric vehicle charging stations and to increase the total funding for the project. And I need a name for you because Don was the one who was helping me out on the committee meeting planning. Will you please both introduce yourselves and the item?
Anne Marie Marshall Doty, Deputy Public Works Director, filling in for Aaron Burt in his absence.
And hi, I'm Steve Gibbs with the Construction Division. I'm standing in for Project Manager John Moore today.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead with whatever your ask is.
Okay, well, we're presenting the construction contract for Apex Construction for the EV charging stations. And we are also asking for some additional funding to complete the funding package on the project. And we're looking to take this to consent on the July 5th meeting.
Additional fundings will allow the project to move forward from the original estimate. It was not going to allow for us to look forward into the future. By increasing the budget, it will allow us to make the expansions over time for our fleet study and allow for us to add additional charging stations over time as that fleet study is completed, and we'll have more information. So this actually is ideally the first part of that fleet study that is coming out. So it's actually tied to that fleet study.
Excellent. And so you'd like this on consent for July 5th? Is that the ask?
Yes.
Great. Given that context, are there questions from the council? I see one from Ms. Forsyth.
Thank you. The memo wasn't quite clear on where the additional funding was coming from. I saw that there was an ask above the budget, but it didn't necessarily indicate what bucket that'll be coming from.
That I am not sure. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, definitely want to know that before we take action for me.
Mr. Fields?
Yes, sorry. Similar questions and also need answers before we can actually make a vote here. So I was going to ask, what is the additional money for? $100 and some odd $1,000, and did we add scope? Did we miss the estimate? And then I think in the introduction, part of that answer came is that we are going to do a study, which, having had this discussion with Director Burt in the past and also our finance director, it feels like that type of activity, that type of analysis should come out of the operating fund. And what I'm thinking is that this is going to be funded by CIP or related to CIP. So I would need a clear definition of the scope. What is it that's being done? Is in fact there some element of over or an underestimate? And where is the money coming from?
Can I provide a point of clarification?
Absolutely.
So a quick point of clarification, council member. The increase in funds is to cover the costs for the increase in size of the transformer and the parts and pieces that go with the larger transformer. The part where I probably provided some confusion was that we also happen to be doing a fleet study, and that fleet study talks about how many charging stations you may want in the future, what your fleet may look like in the future, and the fact that we're going to increase that size of that transformer will allow you to add additional charging stations in the future without having to go back in the future and rebuild something you just built. So you're going to build it once.
Okay, that's a huge clarification, and I appreciate that. And is the total amount for equipment and the installation of that equipment, and there is not necessarily an estimate shortfall? I'm not quite sure how to put that. A misestimate, a too low of an estimate.
I can take that. So I would say our estimate for the actual charging station equipment, the electrical switch gear, was slightly underestimated. And then when we got into design, looked at the existing transformer that serves the parking garage right now, there was enough capacity in that to take on the 20 charging stations that we were seeing for this pilot project, but there was no room for any expansion. And so that's why we decided to go with the upsized transformer to move forward. With that, we could do another 3 20 bank installs in the future.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry?
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the extra cost is attributed to the actual transformer upsize, the upsize in electrical switch gear, and then we underestimated some of the actual charge point infrastructure that we're purchasing. Those 3 components.
Got it. No, that's actually very good news, and I think that's completely a very proactive and smart thing to do, so I appreciate that. And then my last question you just answered, is this in addition to our charge point agreement? And it sounds like the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks.
Ms. Gritzer.
Well, first of all, I would say I'm glad to see that actually in terms of the expansion of scope on this project is that we're forward looking in terms of hoping to be able to create more capacity for our charging, since that seems to be some of the limiting factor for expanding our green fleet. So we have to be able to charge them. So really glad to see this. I'm curious, is this in this committee because there's some sort of urgency with moving this process along, since I imagine it usually would show up somewhere else?
Yeah, so we're frequent offenders, if you will. When we were trying to get these contracts awarded, we have the 45-day limit. And so to hit all the committees, it has to be kind of aligned perfectly to do that within the 45 days. And so we end up, if we've got anything that we need to discuss at committee, we generally have to jump off our normal committee spot to get it in within the 45 days.
Sure. Great. Well, I am supportive of adding this to consent so that we can move this forward. One question I had on just the funding, it mentions the Microsoft 115 fund. Can you just explain for us in the listening public a little bit more about what that is?
I asked a couple questions on that. I'm not exactly sure why that money is associated with this project. I
was just wondering, is it money from Microsoft that we're using, or is it money from the project that we had allocated around like Microsoft work of city budget to that?
We will have to get back to you on that.
That would be my question.
Any other questions from the council? I've got a little bit of a running tally here of which questions we need to get answered before this can go on consent. Let me ask this question to the council. There was an outstanding question about the funds, more than one. If we were to get that response back prior to the meeting in July, would we be okay having this item on consent? Cool. I see thumbs up on that. An additional question from Mr. Fields.
Yeah, no, I'm 2 things at once. I'm ready to put this on consent, and just want to make full disclosure, I do own stock in ChargePoint, so if I need to recuse myself from this vote, I will. I don't own a lot, but I do own some.
Okay. I'm seeing a yes on consent on this item, provided that we can get the clarification on 2 items, which was the bucket of money, clarification that this comes from, and I heard a question in 3 different ways on this. What is the Microsoft 115 fund? The whether this is operations or CIP, and if there's a different bucket, I think was Ms. Forsythe's question, like specifically where this is coming from for the additional funds. Did I get that right? Cool. Anything from?
So, Council Chair, I asked a question about whether it should be from the operating fund, and I think that question was answered.
Got it.
This is, in my mind, this is all CIP, so that is not a question any longer.
Cool. So only 2 questions for you. Great. If we can get a reply to the council before the meeting, that would be great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it looks like you're approved for consent. The next item on our agenda is the DEI internal assessment overview. And I wanted to acknowledge Councilmember Carson has joined us a few minutes ago. I think Ms. Santos probably picked that up. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Harrison.
Hello.
Do we have a presentation to help you out this morning or this
Actually,
afternoon?
I have some talking points at your request shall I just dive in?
I think you can, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. I'm here at the I'm here because at the May 16th, 2023 Public Safety and Human Service Committee of the Whole, Council requested an overview of the internal assessment presented to Council at the study session on January 11, 2022. This the survey, the DEI employee survey summary was conducted by Channing Kelly Ray Consulting. And I'm going to give you a bit of the demographics involved in the survey. So basically, Redmond staff, 318 out of the 681 Redmond staff completed the survey. And the demographic breakdown is men participated at a 49.6%, women 41.5%, and then there, in terms of hierarchy, going from high to low, unidentified, non-binary, and transgender. And then in terms of race and ethnicity, white Caucasian participated at 229, non-identified is the next highest number, multiracial is next, Hispanic and Latino are next, and Black, African American, and Arabian Arab American is last. Of those surveyed participants, 68% have college degrees, so the Redmond staff are highly educated, and that's a very large percentage. The focus of the survey was employee engagement, which is basically company culture and workplace environment that impacts all the aspects of an organization, how employees feel about an organization and the work that they do. It measures commitment and connection to the mission and values and goals, and can be DEI-driven, a DEI-driven entity. It also, employee engagement also includes brand identity. And when I think of brand, to give you something that's tangible, think about Nordstrom's back in the day when they were known as this phenomenal, exceptional customer service, and how that brand identity was played through not only to our customers, but internal clients as well. So in terms of what Redmond's brand identity is, I guess you could say, a work in progress. Also, it includes employee engagement, includes employee life cycle. So from the beginning of when someone is involved and attractive to being a prospective employee at Redmond, all the way through recruitment, onboarding, retention, and development, career development, and separation when they either transition to a new position or through retirement. Employee engagement also includes respect, the values such as respect, communication, transparency, communication in terms of feedback and support, forgiveness, high standards, resourceful, resourceful. That was a tongue twister, and career growth. Employee engagement is also driven by 8 drivers. And these are critical elements that promote, support, and maintain and sustain DEI. And that includes diverse representation, shared benefit and mutual interest, belonging and connection, commitment to change, transparency and accountability, values across differences, equitable rules and systems, psychological safety and voice, which allows you to bring our full selves to work and sharing our insights without fear or penalty or punishment. There's different types of employee engagement, and they vary from actively engaged to not engaged to actively disengaged. Overall strengths from the survey, about at 52%, was that my supervisor tries to understand my point of view. If I raise a concern about ethics and integrity, I'm confident my direct supervisor will do what's right. In terms of opportunity areas of growth, I would say it focused on the demographic identified as people of color, and the concerns listed were, do you think employees feel like there is a culture of safety to express opinions that would run counter to your supervisor, manager, or members of the director's team? And that ranked pretty high within the demographic of people of color, as well as diversity and inclusiveness issues are openly discussed. And that ranked high in terms of not being such a welcoming space. The second demographic concerning women, the issue was, my workplace gives all employees equal opportunity to advance to senior management. That ranked high among women in that it was in the negative, that they didn't find that a welcoming space based on their gender. The second highest was, do you think employees feel like there is a culture of safety to express opinions that would run counter to your supervisor, manager, or members of the director's team? And that ranked pretty high as well in terms of 60%. The recommendations from the survey include communicate diversity, equity, and inclusion priorities and planning, investigate and monitor the experience of marginalized populations for equity and opportunity, increase effort to amplify voices, particularly those of marginalized populations, particularly women and people of color, collaborate with staff and supervisors to identify training, support, and growth opportunities. Share results, data, and information highlighting strengths and areas needing improvement. Understanding that the amazing data that we were able to retrieve from the survey, I state that change isn't linear, and so being able to tap into and understand where we are based on that data, we're still moving forward. And since I've been on the job for 3.5 months, I recognize that change isn't linear, and that as you're doing research and learning and practicing, I have already started implementing changes. For example, the Welcoming Committee, I have partnered up with HR in terms of reimagining what the Welcoming Committee would look like. And so looking at it specifically in terms of the career growing skills. For example, we're looking at changing the name from Welcoming Committee to the Ready Committee, and having the members identifying as Ready ambassadors, where they would have opportunities to grow their skill set in team leadership, public speaking, and participating on citywide initiatives. I've also been conducting trainings for the Parks and Rec summer camp teams in terms of being able to create a more inclusive, welcoming, and diverse applicants of camp participants, and so how to engage them most in the best meaningful way, and doing some DEI training on that in terms of serving as a resource. I also will be spending time on site at the camps to be able to be accessible to the camp leaderships in terms of if they have questions or just to know or an issue. So just to be at the ready. Also, I have participated in implicit buying, interviewing coaching for the fire department. And I've been partnering up with Anita Page in the Ready trainings. And again, like I said, change isn't linear, and that as we gather data, we are implementing and putting it into practice. So it's all hands on decks, and it's a very 360 approach. Any questions?
Questions from the council? I see Ms. Kritzer here in chambers. That was a lot of information. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you very much for the information. And appreciate getting your insights fresh to this, some of this information too, in your role to be able to kind of share how you've used that in the first several months on the job. Really exciting to hear about some of those efforts. I wanted to be clear that when I had made this a request to be able to hear about this, my request wasn't to see the presentation we saw in January of 2022. It was my understanding was that after that, this was kind of the introduction of the first survey they did. Then the consultant did a series of listening sessions that even included council members. I know that I had chatted with her as well, but also with employees, and came out with a more detailed set of recommendations. So I'm hoping that at some point we'll be able to see her more, because I think, as you can see in the PowerPoint, she had her initial set, but I think there was a more detailed set that I was hoping we were going to get in terms of more specific recommendations for action, kind of coming out of both the qualitative interviews as well as that quantitative survey. Because I think that quantitative survey was very helpful, but also, especially my understanding was that there may have been some interviews in particular focusing on staff who identify as people of color and other diverse populations within our staff. So if that's possible in the future to be able to get any more of the details of the outcomes of that work, as well as I know that we had decided we were going to break up internal and external, but to have a future discussion around the outcomes of what we got from doing the external assessment as well. I know I actually just talked with some community members this week who had participated in some of those external listening sessions, who said that they've been waiting to find out what we're going to do with their input, and who said that they had shared a lot of kind of personal insights and information, and hoped that they would be seeing action from the city, but we haven't yet seen what it is they told us. So if possible, would love to be able to see that information that came about throughout all of 2022 and be able to just, and I think into 2023, to be able to figure out what actions we want to take going forward.
Okay, then I will do my due diligence and get that information, so when I can circle back next time.
Yeah, and I think this, by the way, is a great refresher of the information we've had already, though, and to hear that new insight. So glad to kind of start on this conversation. Hopefully each time we see this in committee, we'll make some progress on it, but I wanted to be clear on the ask going forward.
I appreciate your clarification. Yeah. Thank you.
And I actually, one quick question, if the chair will permit.
Got plenty of time today.
So one of the things that I know I had heard through during discussion of that kind of individual back and forth was that one of the pieces being considered was around employee affinity groups for employees that of different backgrounds, and just curious whether there were any recommendations on that, or whether there's any progress in that area. I know that we had also heard about that from our previous DEI manager, anyway, so curious to know if there's any progress on that or if that's an ongoing conversation.
I'll have to get back with you on that as well.
Great, yeah,
Oh, I
and
apologize.
recognizing still, I know you're still booting everything up, so
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm doing a deep dive and learning and getting caught up and actually trying to address the needs that are at hand. Like I say, like I shared with you previously, change is not linear. You're doing it all at the same time. So I appreciate your patience with me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kritzer. Excuse me. Ms. Stewart.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harrison. Actually, a couple of my questions just got answered. I too was interested in those recommendations on the very last slide when we saw those last presented to create the focus groups for different staff groups. So very curious to hear your assessment of that recommendation moving forward, I guess. I do want to acknowledge then, since my original question was answered, I do very much like the idea of transitioning the welcoming committee to something that is beyond the welcome. So whether it is about respect, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or whatever it gets named, the idea that it is a committee of people and leaders in our organization who are invested in developing a culture of belonging today, tomorrow, and in their careers at the City of Redmond, I very much appreciate that move. So thanks so much. I do look forward to your feedback on the focus groups. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Forsyth.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation and the hard work that I know you're doing. I love hearing about the kind of restructure with the Welcome Committee, and I'm really looking forward to see the outcome of that work that you have in partnership with them. Just in your estimation and your 3 months, how's it going and how are we doing?
Well, first of all, I am very excited to be here. I think in terms of for someone who has such a longstanding commitment to DEI in terms of its power to really change the world and make the world better through the DEI lens, working for having an opportunity within city governance is a pretty awesome and bold and brave and a dream to be able to engage at all levels. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm very committed to not only the here and now, but where we want to move forward in terms of how to create a world where all are valued and seen and heard, and that we're only limited by our imagination and our commitment to humanity.
Mr. Fields. Thank you for that lovely comment, by the way. That should be quoted on the wall.
So thank you. And based on that comment and that loving comment, I want to express my gratitude for your patience with us, because to do this right is more important than to do it fast. I have two questions. One, how was this, and I'm sure it's somewhere in the data, but how was this survey distributed to the employees? Was it through their immediate supervisor, or was it just invitation online? What was the main gist of getting people to respond?
The mechanism, I'll have to get back with you on that question as well. I apologize.
No worries. And then the other question, I think, is more of also a question that I would like to see answered at some point. And I remember this in January, and I've seen this in other types of surveys, and it strikes me each time I see it, where the closer the relationship, the more confidence that employees or people have in in justice or what's being done. And the more distant, then, or they're further from their immediate relationship, then it becomes less confident. And the same with the survey that you just presented to us. And I don't think I think that I fear, let me put it that way, that the city would just say, well, we need to get our message out. I hope that we get underneath that and actually find out if there's a difference or a dissonance in the confidence between the city at large, meaning the executive office or even council, versus their immediate supervisor. I hope that we can understand why there is more distrust at the broader level. So I know that was a lot, but I hope you understand the question.
I do, but I think that historically, work has never been a safe place and it has always been historically been very hierarchical. And so how do you transform that to where someone who at the beginning of their career has an opportunity to grow their career with a given organization and be recognized, as opposed, and how do you connect the leadership, the CEO to the VPs in terms of people who are entry level, and what that communication looks like, and how who has access to whom, and all the rules that say no, don't do it this way, but using your imagination, there are other options in terms of how you build, employee engagement and a true sense of belonging, where someone not only brings their whole selves to the work that they may be passionate about, but are able to tap into their talents to really make better products and transform organization. And so I guess in terms of DEI, I see it as an opportunity to where it's about reimagine better ways of being, better ways of doing work, better ways of living. And so it speaks to all that, because what has happened in the past isn't working. I mean, there's a great debate about a 32-hour work week, a 4-day work week, in terms of how that's more humane and more reasonable for a family household where you have both working parents, and how by the time 60 Minute comes on at 7 o'clock and you hear that clock ticking, you dread, because you realize how much you didn't get done. So I think it's about how to utilize DEI in terms of reimagining work.
So you're exactly describing my concern, or my issue, I guess I should say. Because if we're going to have limited time and limited resources, and the question is, who needs the training? I don't, what I feared, and you dissuaded me from having that fear, because I think you understand what the complete picture, and I really appreciate that. But what I had feared is that the city would come back and say, people just don't understand how good we are, and that was my fear. And what it's possible that leadership and executive levels are the ones where we really need to focus our training and our resources for the reimagining that you're talking about. And I get it that it's not just one level, but I didn't want to see a program go forward where we're just going to continually repeat how good we are, as opposed to getting better.
Well, my motto is it's always is to be going from good to great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Mr. Carson.
Thank you. So I had a quick question on back to the presentation, and I don't think, well, I don't know where the terms come from, but I was curious if you knew, or if so on the employees and engagement slide, it talks about actively engaged, not engaged, and actively disengaged, which I'm having difficulties understanding what not engaged and actively disengaged are in comparison to each other. But so if you have some background, or you can research this, because I think there's a big piece that's missing here, which is passively engaged people who, it's like, and I think the best way I can illustrate it is with a baseball analogy. So you've got your people who watch every Mariner game as live if they can and on replay if they must. And then those of us who check in for the scores and see how the team's doing. And then only when there's a buzz, do maybe the not engaged and the actively disengaged get involved. So the passively engaged, which, you're kind of keeping your finger on the pulse, but you're not really super engaged, if you will. So I'm curious if you know where, because it really seems like there's a big piece missing in those three, and maybe there's a fourth that is just not really even represented there.
Well,
I think that's true in workplaces too, which is why I use that, but it's an easy analogy. So, your thoughts?
I'll have to, because I'm interpreting her research and her lexicon, her vocabulary. So
Right.
I need to get back with you in terms of
That's
that.
great. I just wondered because it seems to me that we're just missing a big piece here because I know people who are passively engaged at work. They're basically focused on their work, but they're not really maybe listening to all the politics that are going on, which can help their career if they know kind of things, that it's a different kind of engagement, I guess. So anyway,
Yes,
great, thank you.
sure.
Any other questions from the council members before I ask mine? I don't see any. I wanted to compliment you on this great job of pulling together a lot of information that isn't yours to start with. So the analogy I thought of.
I'll take that, thank you.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're doing a great job. The comments you made today have been more than uplifting, and the thought I had that came to mind was that a rising tide lifts all boats. And you are not only trying to lift all the boats in terms of all of humanity, but actually like trying to shift the direction of an aircraft carrier at the moment, right? So I could see that. And I know Ms. Stewart commented on your change in direction for the Ready Committee. I especially appreciate the fact that you're working on skill development for those group members. That's great. And Ms. Kritzer pointed out affinity groups is another option as well. But this is a lot and it overloads you. So my real question is, how can we help you before we see you next time?
Just continue to be kind
We can work on
and
that.
understanding. I have to say, I haven't been new in a long time, and this is really a different feeling. So I'm getting, my sea legs are getting stronger every day, and my commitment is unwavering. So I just really appreciate your patience and kindness with me.
Excellent. I think we are due for seeing you in 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what council remembers? Ms. Kritzer?
I thought we had previously talked about now getting a monthly update
I'm
at this
curious
committee.
what
I'm
that
not sure
would
if others agree on this or not, but just kind of what's been going on in the last month. I'm happy to do it if you wanted to have an extra month, though, in 2 months, but just curious if others still agree with that.
In 3 months will be month 6 for you, right?
Yeah, just about.
Okay, great.
But I'm fine with the monthly updates. I mean, I'm exercising this format of speaking within this format. So the more I do it, the better I'm going to get.
Okay. Ms. Forsyth and Ms. Stewart, I'm not sure who was first. If you wouldn't mind self-managing that would be perfect. Ms. Forsyth, Ms. Stewart.
Thank you so much. I was just going to chime in on that. I seem to remember some interest from council in having at least a monthly informational memo, much like we get from Jenny Liebeck. I don't know if others remember it the same way, but I know that was on the table at one point.
Do we have metrics for her to track monthly? Ms. Kritzer, you want to comment on the thing, and then Ms. Forsyth and Ms. Stewart, I think. Ms. Stewart, do you still have a question? I just want to make sure I close out what your question was before I move on to Ms. Kritzer's comment on your question.
Well, was your question directed at me about the metrics? Because
No, that was a momentary shout into the air, so we can
Okay.
cover that as a group if we need to. Yeah. Ms. Kritzer?
I was just going to comment to that point. I think what's great about Ms. Liebeck's report is that it's just kind of what are some of the key things that have been the goings on. It doesn't always align to metrics. A lot of times it's just like, here are the main buckets of what we've kind of been working on. So we can, don't necessarily need like a huge report every month, but perhaps there'll be the opportunity to bring back some of the other information that we requested this session, either next month or the following. And if not, then to just hear about the interim activities. I don't think we need metrics for that.
Okay, and I will work with you and Chief Shepherd, I think he's behind me here, to make sure we have some space for you on the agenda.
Sounds good.
Okay. Ms. Forsyth, comments on either of those two items?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I want to make sure that Ms. Harrison has time to actually do the work, and I don't want to necessarily bog us down with monthly reports. So, but hearing that she is good to bring us information every month, great. If it becomes a point where it just is too much, just I think let us know and we can reevaluate at that point.
All right, sounds good.
To this end, one suggestion I would have, that question of how we can help on a monthly basis might be really engaging for us. So if that's the 5 minutes we can give you on an agenda, if you have the answer to that question on a monthly basis, I think we'd love to see you.
Well, I'm thinking if you would like a monthly report that's similar to what Ms. Liebeck gives, I'm thinking more of a snapshot in terms of like what I'm doing and then how I'm researching and addressing some of the questions. So if I have that flexibility and duality to do both, I think that would be helpful.
Cool. Sounds good to me. Looks like we got a couple thumbs up too. Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. We will I'm happy to chat more about it, and we'll see if we can collect some of the disparate thoughts here for you for next time.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any other items for the good of the order today? Ms. Forsyth.
Thank you. I just wanted to flag something that we hadn't seen anything on in the last 6 months now. In the budget, it was, I believe, Councilmember Khan's proposal that we have a consultant come in on our public safety topic, and I think we set aside $35,000 to have that consultant work done. The suggested consultant was LEAP. I'm not sure if that's the consultant we'll be going with, but that was the suggestion at the time or similar. So just wanted to get a status check on that, potentially, hopefully, at our next public safety meeting, or if anyone can talk to it today, that would be great, but otherwise, next month is fun.
Thanks, Ms. Forsyth. I don't see anyone here from police today.
Okay.
And Mr. Chief Shepherd is conferring with Ms. Files here in Chambers to see what's going on. One moment.
No worries.
Play the Jeopardy music in the back of your head for a second.
Next month is also okay.
We will follow up with PD on that. Thank you. I got your email about this as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Great. Any other items for the good of the order this afternoon? Thank you for the lively discussion and your engagement. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.